Hi everyone, we're moving on to the last market structure, which is oligopoly. Coming towards the characteristics of oligopoly, the first one is that there are few firms in the market. The firms should be more than one, but there is no specific number that how many they should be. Usually, when there is high concentration of firms with respect to market share, we consider those firms oligopoly. For example, laptops in the market of laptops, Apple, Dell, and HP, these three firms have more market share as compared to the rest, like LG, Lenovo, but they do come in oligopoly. The second one is there are high barriers to entry and exit. Definitely setting up an oligopoly firm is expensive. Like if you compare it with perfect competition. So if you want to start a dairy farm business, that's cheaper as compared to if you want to build aeroplanes or aircraft or even automobiles. So that's why there are few firms in the market. And as there are few firms in the market, the strategies are severely interconnected. So usually the commodity is same, but it's somehow unique, or they make you believe that the commodity is different by different style, or maybe they offer unique services, or maybe a lifetime warranty, or just keep on innovating something. So how do you say that strategies are interconnected? For that, you need to know what firms come within oligopoly. So, as I mentioned before, market of laptops, there are so many brands. Apart from that, for mobile phones too, you have Apple, Samsung, Huawei, Nokia, but usually Apple and Samsung comprises of 70 to 80% of market share. Apart from that, you have automobile industry, you have Ford, General Motors, BMW, and so many other automobile industries who are competing with each other. So as I mentioned, the strategies are interconnected. For example, there was one company which initiated touch mobiles, and then the rest of the firm also started with that. Or then like General Motors initiated with SUV cars, and then all the other firms copied their idea. Even Henry Ford started with the idea of automatic cars, but later on General Motors and other firms started with that. So notice that the companies competing somehow are similar and offering same product or services, but the main target is to capture as many customers as they can, and they cannot maximize profit or capture a lot of customers based on prices, because if they all choose to decrease prices, then there would be a competition in decreasing prices, and after that definitely total revenue would fall. So usually these firms spend a lot of revenue in research and development to have a new product innovation, or to have a improvement in the quality, or respond to customers' need, or offer more guarantee or a warranty time of the product. Even via advertisement, you can make the customers believe that having a certain logo or a product can make you feel cool about commodity. Like usually, apart from Apple being user friendly, majority of people buy it because they find the Apple logo cool. So that's how firms maximize profit and increase their market share. So that's actually game theory which we're about to do. Oligopoly and monopolistic competition. These two market structures are quite similar, as in they operate in similar manner. But the difference is that oligopoly is made of only few firms, as in there are only few firms dominating the market. So here in oligopoly, the firms make decisions and develop strategies keeping in view the actions of competitors. For example, if they introduce a new product or innovation in their commodity, how would this affect the actions of other firms? So that's why we say that the strategies are interconnected. In short, they use game theory. And game theory it's the study of strategic decision making with respect to firms or even individuals. So now you might say or think that if there are few large firms competing, why don't they choose to cooperate? So this cooperation is called a collusion where firms decide that okay, this is the price and no one will sell the product or services below this price, or they decide on the output that we will not produce more than this unit. So all the firms agreeing to this collusion comes within a cartel, but none of the firms usually believe that the rest of the firms which actually keep up with the collusion. You never know, the rest of the firms might start selling the product or service at a lower price and breach the cartel. So that's what we will learn in game theory and prisoner's dilemma, that even if people or companies rationally follow their interest, the best outcome is hard to reach because they cannot or they don't choose to cooperate. Apart from that, usually collusions or developing cartels is illegal in most of the countries because they are not socially and good for the economic welfare. Because if the high leading firms choose to sell a commodity at a very higher price and choose to limit the production, definitely it will affect the consumer surplus, in general, the consumers in the market. So that's why cartel and collusion they are usually illegal. Prisoner's Dilemma is an important game in game theory, and it provides insight into why cooperation is difficult, even though it leads towards better outcome for both of the companies or even individuals. So it begins with a story about two criminals who have been captured by doing any minor crime, but police suspect that they might have done some robberies, but they lack hard evidence to convict both of them of the second major crime. So police arrest both of the criminals and take them into separate rooms, and they all are offered two choices. Either they can confess and remain silent. So remember here, they are not aware of the payoffs or what decision would Aaron or Bond would decide, either choose to confess or remain silent. So in reality, definitely oligopoly firms does not involve in this situation of police or involved in crimes, but we use prisoners' dilemmas logic to understand strategies. So in simpler words, we have to find a dominant strategy of each criminal or each company, you can say. So dominant strategy, it's a strategy which is best for a player in a game, regardless whatever the strategy the other player chooses. So the table in front of you, it's a payoff matrix with payoffs of whatever the strategy each criminal chooses. So one criminal is Aaron, the another one is Bond, and both of them have similar choices. Either they can confess or they can choose to remain silent, but they're not sure what the other person would choose. Apart from that, they are only aware of their payoffs, they're not aware of another person's payoff. So Aaron's payoff is in this box. For your convenience, all the Aaron's payoffs are in the box and bonds payoffs are out of the box. So let's begin with Bond's decision. So suppose if Bond is thinking, let's say Aaron choose to remain silent. What will be the best strategy for Bond? To confess or remain silent? Keeping in view Aaron remains silent. So definitely if you look at the table, Bond should choose to confess because if he would confess, he could go free. But if he also chooses to remain silent, he has to spend 1 year in jail. So the best strategy out of these two is to confess and go free. But what if he's thinking that Aaron might choose to confess? Then what would be best strategy for Bond? Again, the best strategy for Bond is to confess because if he confess, he has to spend 8 years in jail. But if he chooses to remain silent, he has to spend 20 years in jail. So the dominant strategy for Bond is to confess and spend 8 years in jail. Now what about Aaron's decision? Definitely Aaron has same situation but the payoffs are different. So suppose he thinks that Bond choose to confess. What is the best strategy for Aaron? So for Aaron, it's best if he choose to confess because then he would spend 8 years in jail. But if he choose to remain silent, he has to spend 20 years in jail. So best strategy for Aaron is to confess and spend 8 years in jail. But if Aaron thinks that suppose Bond might choose to remain silent about the crime, then what is the best strategy for him? So again, it's better if he choose to confess because if he choose to confess, Aaron can go free. But if Aaron choose to remain silent, he has to spend 1 year in jail. So the dominant strategy for Aaron is also to confess. So in the end, both criminals, Aaron and Bond, they choose to confess and spend 8 years in jail. Now you might be thinking that they would have been foreseeing this situation and maybe planned ahead that if any such thing happened, we both can choose to remain silent and spend only 1 year in jail. But in reality, they can never trust the other person because involving in difficult situation, every person thinks about their personal interest, their benefit. So the safer strategy was to confess and spend 8 years in jail rather taking the risk of remaining silent and spending 20 years because you're never sure whether the other person would confess or remain silent and then you have to keep up with the consequences. But with respect to oligopoly firm, we apply the same logic, but the situation is different. For instance, it might be regarding do they need to increase the prices of the commodity or maintain the prices or should they decrease the prices or do they need to innovate any commodity or do they need to develop a new service. So these are some of the situations involved in prisoner's dilemma with respect to oligopoly. So keeping in view the previous scenario of prisoner's dilemma, I've given you a scenario, a practice question for an oligopoly firm. So suppose there are two firms, firm A and firm B. We're not interested in knowing what product or service they're dealing with, but we must know their dominant strategy. So like previous case where the prisoners had to decide whether they confess or remain silent, here the firms have to decide should they maintain prices of their product or decrease the price. Both of the firm have the same options but different payoff matrix. So keeping in view the previous logic, solve this practice question and illustrate which firm has a dominant strategy, either in maintaining prices or decreasing prices. For further insight, please read on to Chapter 17.